our 8th graders get the opportunity to visit Washington, D.C. They get to go to a lot of memorials and pay their respects. And one of our favorite places to go is the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. And having the privilege to lay a wreath there every year, our kids write an essay, and those essays are blindly chosen, and 4 of them get to go and, and lay the wreath at the Unknown Soldier. Alicia was one of our chosen kiddos who got to lay a wreath this last year. She's going to read her essay to us.
The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier serves as the symbolic grave for all who are dead whose remains have not been found or identified. The tomb began with one unknown service member from World War I, and today is the grave of 3 unidentified service members. Its meaning has evolved to represent the memory of all military members throughout American history. The tomb is very symbolic and important to our nation. The wreath-laying ceremony was made to honor more than just the 3 that are buried, but all military members who have honored our country, made sacrifices, and especially those that never came home. The wreath-laying ceremony is a very meaningful ceremony, not just only to those who serve, but myself as well. The tomb serves as a place for people to think and remember all the sacrifices made by brave service members. It is a place of mourning for military members to honor their dead brothers and sisters in war. In addition, the site honors all who served as well as the unidentified soldiers who have sacrificed their lives for our country. Soldiers who served in wars such as Civil War, World War I, World War II, the Korean War, the Vietnam War, and the Spanish-American War are remembered here. Because this monument is so meaningful to our nation, guards protect the tomb and discourage people from stepping and climbing on it. When I think of service members, I think of my dad, who has been in the U.S. Air National Guard for over 22 years. He was a metals technologist and is currently an occupational safety specialist. Although his job isn't the most dangerous in the military, it does cause him to be gone quite a bit. I couldn't imagine the devastation of someone's loved one not coming home as a result of their service. My dad has never been activated to war. He very well could be, and to me, that is a very scary thought. The families of the service members also have to make sacrifices. Personally, my family has made sacrifices, like when my dad gets activated over long periods of time. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021, my dad got activated to work at a hospital in Eugene, Oregon. This activation was only for 2 months, but it was hard to watch my dad balance his teaching job while working long shifts at hospitals with no days off. We missed him terribly, and because of this, we had to pick up extra things around the house and in our everyday lives. It was very hard without him, and we pray we won't ever have to go through that again. It was very challenging for our family, but that's what helps families grow. During this, I remember counting the days until he'd be able to come back home, and our lives could go back to being somewhat normal. This ceremony is important to me because I feel that my family is partially tied into the military. I think that every soldier should be recognized on the tomb. On the tomb itself, it says "No but to God," saying God only knows who is in there. The truth is, there are a lot of things that God only knows. We all try to be this perfect example of God, but we all fall short. God knows everything in the past and what is to come, every good and every bad thing, all of it. It's impossible to be perfect, but at Salem Academy, some of the main virtues encouraged are to honor and represent God in everything you say and do, along with always doing what is right, even when no one is watching. I don't always think before I speak, but I recognize when I do wrong and I make amends. By no means am I a perfect Christian, but who is? Therefore, I always strive to be kind to everyone I encounter, because those encounters may lead others to know and love Christ our Lord. The tomb represents people who sacrificed their lives for the greater good, but were not recognized for doing so. It's important to do what God would do and live a Christ-like life, even if you won't get noticed or rewarded for it, because God knows and He will reward you. At Salem Academy, we serve a powerful, almighty God who will love every single one of us for all eternity. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier is a very important monument that honors soldiers who risked and sacrificed their lives so our country could be free. However, freedom is not free. It is the sacrifices made by these soldiers and all the service members that gives us the freedoms we have today. I will forever be grateful. The wreath-laying ceremony is a very honorable ceremony and was a highlight for me in our DC trip last year. I'm very thankful that I got to represent my school by participating in this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I will never forget it. I'm also thankful for the opportunity to say thank you for all of the veterans here today in the audience for their service and sacrifices for our country. Thank you for your time.
I want to take a moment to recognize our special guest. Today we have with us World War II veteran Staff Sergeant Wesley Robinson, who served from 1943 to 1946 and was stationed in Marseille, France, and the Philippines, and after peace was declared, he worked in Army supply store in in Tokyo, Japan, which he had the great honor of meeting the wife of General Douglas MacArthur when she came to make a purchase. He also brought with him this newspaper from France. It's the day after peace was declared. You can see on the front, it's over, which was a great celebration so far. So this time, Wesley, would you please stand and let's give a round of applause. It's quite an honor to have you here. Get everything organized here. Our guest speaker today is Bernie Bennett, who also shared about another World War II veteran, his uncle and Medal of Honor recipient, Joe Mann. Bernie Bennett attended Salem Academy for 6 years and played in football, basketball, and ran track. After graduating in 1975, he worked for the FBI for 1 year in Washington, D.C. He returned to Oregon and attended Chemeketa Community College, Willamette University, Portland State University, and Western Oregon University, earning degrees in criminal justice administration, political science, and education. After a short stint as a teacher, he worked at the White House and the Federal Bureau of Prisons and the American Arbitration Association. Most of his career, he was employed as a United States Postal Inspector and later a special agent with the Office of Inspector General, tasked with investigating federal crimes in Alaska and the Pacific Northwest. After retirement, he wrote a book entitled A Greater Destiny, which is the story about his uncle. The book was awarded the Feathered Quill Award for being the best memoir in 2021. At this point, let's give a great round of applause for Bernie.
Thank you. It's great to be here today. And it's especially nice to see a couple old friends, Dave Dunn and Jerry Barnick, who were my teammates in sports back in the 70s, so thanks for coming. When I was a 7th grader, I had a math teacher named Martin Haas. You remember him, Dave? Yeah. He taught here for 1 or maybe 2 years, then he left. After that, I never saw him again, and I never heard of him. I didn't know anything about him. But several months ago, his name popped into my mind, and I thought I would give him a call. He wasn't sure who I was, but he thought that he might remember me. He said that he might have me confused with another person, probably one of the nerds, I don't know. But after some small talk, I told him that I had a couple questions that I wanted to ask him. The first question was, I wanted to know if it was true that he could throw a football 60 yards, as that was a rumor amongst us 7th grade boys. As 13-year-olds, we were all amazed that somebody, especially a teacher, especially one that was that old, could throw a football that far. After all, he had to have been in his late 20s. It seemed unlikely that he could do that. I don't remember his answer to that question, but I do remember the delight in his voice for me remembering him as a teacher, for being grateful for him. And I don't want to brag about this next thing, but I think I hold a record at Salem Academy that still stands. And I wanted to ask my teacher about that. I said, Mr. Haas, could you tell me why you gave me a D minus in math? And I think that's an accomplishment that not many people have. I shouldn't be proud of it, but I kind of am. And he said, because I saw potential in you, and I didn't want you to see yourself as a failure. But I was a failure because I hadn't been doing my homework, I hadn't paid attention in class, and I probably flunked all my tests. So I deserved that grade, but he showed me a small measure of grace by giving me something a little better than an F. And it took me 50 years to realize how grateful I was for that. So it was important for me to call him and thank him for that. The men and women we celebrate today deserve nothing less. We owe them our gratitude, and I'm so pleased we have the opportunity to have them here with us today. Heraclitus was an ancient Greek philosopher who said this about men in battle. Out of every 100 men, 10 shouldn't even be there. 80 are just targets. 9 are the real fighters, and we are lucky to have them, for it's those who make the battle. Ah, but the one is a warrior, and he will bring the others back. Today I'd like to tell you a story about one of those warriors. He was my uncle, Joe Mann. He grew up in a family of 11 near Spokane, Washington, on a wheat farm. As a young kid, he was very sickly. He was so sick that he got held back a grade in grade school. As he grew, he became impulsive, daring, and sometimes careless. A friend described him as being fearless. He was the kind of kid who would jump out of a hayloft and break his leg. And once his cast was removed, he'd go right back to the hayloft and jump again. As a teenager, he got kicked in the head by a mule. A year later, his brother accidentally hit him in the head with an axe. So he definitely was accident prone. He was a happy and playful teenager who liked to whistle while he worked. He loved his younger 5 siblings. He made desks and toys for them, and he often took them bike riding, sledding, kite flying, and ice skating. He chopped wood, raked leaves, and mowed lawns for the widows in town. Suffice it to say, he loved helping others. His servant heart prepared him for what was to come 3 years later. When he was 18, a pastor invited him to church. He was the first one out of his family of 11 to attend church. He got baptized and became a member. It was because of his enthusiasm for the Lord that the rest of his family started going to church. When he was a senior in high school, he climbed the church's steeple to put the cross on top, but it's still there today. At Reardon High School, he participated in football, tennis, debate, and Future Farmers of America. His friends nicknamed him Tiger since he was scrappy and tenacious. When he was a senior, he broke his collarbone playing football, but refused to leave the game. After the game, he was taken to the hospital, and a metal plate was placed in his clavicle to bring the 2 bones together. Like me, he wasn't much of a student, but his report cards did show that he was loyal, kind, trustworthy, and had good character. He was not one to shy away from a fight, though. One time on the way to school, a neighborhood kid threw my mother's lunch pail out the window. Joe stood up and on the spot hit him with the right cross that broke one of his best friend's nose. Another time, my mom came upon a group of kids gathered in the schoolyard, and in the middle was her brother Joe, with his fist raised, squared off against the school's bully. He often stood up for the underdog. I think Joe deserved the Brother of the Year award when he took his younger sister to the homecoming dance because nobody else asked her. She said that was one of her fondest memories of her brother, that he would do that. That same year, Glenn Miller topped the musical charts with a song titled In an Old Dutch Garden by an Old Dutch Mill. Because of the song's popularity, the school's homecoming committee decided to have the Dutch theme for the homecoming dance. I doubt if Joe could even find Holland on the map, but ironically, 3 years later, he would be buried there. After graduating from high school, Joe had 2 dreams. He wanted to learn to fly an airplane, and he wanted to explore Alaska. His 2 older brothers were pilots with the Army Air Corps, and he wanted to follow in their footsteps. When World War II broke out, he immediately went to Fort Lewis to take his physical. Due to the metal plate in his shoulder, he failed the physical. So he was devastated because his lifelong dream was over. But he learned of a different kind of soldier, and that was a soldier that would jump out of airplanes. And to him, I think that sounded even better. So he volunteered to be a paratrooper. By being a paratrooper, Joe was paid $50 a month more than the regular soldier. Each month, he sent that $50 home to his parents. In August 1942, Joe left for boot camp, where he was assigned to the 101st Airborne Division's 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment at Camp Decoy, Georgia. There, he trained alongside the Band of Brothers, the famous soldiers that Tom Hanks and Steven Spielberg made a movie about. His sergeant there was a guy named Charles Skeen. Skeen was a California beach bum who liked wild women, fast motorcycles, and hard liquor. From day one, Skeen hated Joe. Skeen busted Joe down from private first class to private several times. After being bullied for a year and being harassed for a year, Joe had finally had enough of Skeen. He reacted to something Skeen said and was punished by being transferred out of the regiment, which surely was an embarrassment. On his last day with the 506th, Joe and a friend sat on a garbage dumpster commiserating his transfer. Joe's final words were, "You haven't heard the last of me." 3 weeks later, Joe was shipped to England to prepare for the war in Europe. In May 1944, he participated in the Screaming Eagles' final training exercise before the invasion of Normandy. It was meant to be a routine jump at night over the Kennet Valley in England. The strong winds kicked up and blew the men off course. They hit the ground hard, landing on rock walls, fences, and in trees. In all, 426 paratroopers broke bones. Joe didn't break a bone, but he suffered an internal injury that required surgery. His 8-week recovery in the hospital in England caused him to miss D-Day, the invasion of Normandy. He thought that he had missed his chance to serve his country and to prove to Sergeant Skeen that he was a capable soldier. On September 17, 1944, Joe finally got the chance to go to battle. He climbed aboard a C-47 Skytrain airplane and headed to Holland. He and 6,000 other soldiers fell from the sky near the town of Best. To the Dutch, the paratroopers looked like angels sent from heaven to rescue them from the Germans who had taken over their country. The paratroopers landed behind the enemy lines, each with only a rifle and several hand grenades. Surrounding them were German soldiers who had machine guns, large caliber artillery, and tanks. Joe and his buddies had one task. They were to seize control of a bridge that crossed a canal so that British tanks could use that road to drive the Germans out of Holland. If the paratroopers did not seize that bridge, the entire operation, which was called Operation Market Garden, would likely fail, and every one of them would die because there would be no way out. It was believed that there were only a few Germans around the town of Best, so seizing the bridge should be an easy task. However, unbeknownst to them, 1,200 Germans moved into Best the previous day. When the paratroopers landed, they were immediately attacked by the Germans. Joe's 18-man platoon, plus 26 Army engineers who tagged along, were ordered to get to the bridge as quickly as possible. As a scout, Joe's job was to lead his platoon to the bridge before the Germans could get there. He guided the 44 men through a dense forest, around a marsh, and over a dike to get to the canal. The trek took much longer than expected. By the time they got to the canal, it was pitch dark and raining. The men felt their way through the dark until Joe spotted the bridge's silhouette in the distance. He and his lieutenant crept to within 100 yards of the bridge to see what they were up against. Standing on the bridge were 200 Germans. Joe and his buddies were outnumbered 4-1. As they lay in the grass, a German guard walked through the dark straight toward them. As he drew closer, they smelled his body odor, rancid leather boots, and musty tobacco. For 40 minutes, they lay face down, scarcely breathing, as the German soldier walked circles around them, at times inches from Joe's face. A noise distracted the German soldier, allowing Joe to jump up and kill him. This set off a hail of machine gun fire that Joe dodged as he and his lieutenant ran back to the rest of the platoon that was waiting for them. They would have to regroup and attempt to capture the bridge in the morning. The next morning, September 18th, the Germans discovered Joe's platoon hunkered down beside the canal. They opened fire, wounding and killing many of Joe's buddies. The 26 Army engineers who were in the group ran for their lives. They deserted by swimming across the canal or hightailing it into the woods, never to be seen again. That left only 15 paratroopers to face the 200 Germans. But suddenly the bridge exploded. The Germans had detonated dynamite, reducing the concrete structure to rubble. With their objective lost, the 15 soldiers had one objective, and that was to get out of there alive. That afternoon, the Germans shelled their foxholes with rounds from their most feared weapon, an 88 millimeter gun, whose round weighed 32 pounds each. But suddenly, out of nowhere, American Thunderbird airplanes swooped from the clouds overhead. Their rescuers had come, they thought. Unfortunately, the Thunderbolts mistook Joe and his platoon for the enemy. They were strafed with bullets by friendly fire as the Germans watched even more Americans die. Joe had had enough. He gritted his teeth and he grabbed a bazooka. He was going to find the 88 millimeter gun and destroy it himself. He crept forward 60 yards and with one shot destroyed the gun. With another shot, he destroyed the German stockpiled ammunition. For the next hour, by himself, he hid amongst the bridge's rubble, shooting at the enemy with his rifle. He was spotted by the Germans. 6 of them ran straight at him. He jumped out from behind the rubble and in an exposed position, killed the enemy one by one until he was shot 4 times in his arms and shoulders. He staggered back to his buddies who were watching from the canal. But by now, the medic was out of morphine, there were no painkillers, so there was nothing to give him for the gaping wounds in his body. The medic wrapped both of Joe's arms in bandages and secured them to his body like a straitjacket. Joe refused to go into the trench with the other wounded and instead returned to the battlefield. He wriggled out of his bandages and took one-armed potshots at the enemy with his rifle. His lieutenant ordered him to get back into the trench with the other wounded. This time, Joe complied. But in the middle of the night, he snuck out of the trench and searched for his buddies who were still able to fight. He found 6 soldiers, that was all that was left, hunkered down in a trench. The lieutenant once again told him to go back to the wounded. In shock, Joe trembled uncontrollably and his teeth chattered. He pleaded to stay, insisting he could still help. His lieutenant relented and propped him up against the trench where Joe said he would try to stay awake to stand guard during the night. Early September 19th, shadowy figures approached through the fog. Joe yelled to the men to wake up, but it was too late. Before the Americans could react, the Germans threw potato masher grenades into the trench. A paratrooper threw the first grenade out before it exploded. The second grenade hit a machine gun and exploded in the machine gunner's face, blinding him. The third grenade landed in the dirt next to the now sightless machine gunner, but he groped for it and he found it and miraculously threw it out before it exploded. The fourth grenade landed in the dirt next to Joe. His arms were bound to his side and none of his buddies could reach it. They looked at each other, knowing that they were all going to die. Joe said, "I'll take this one." He turned and threw his body on the grenade. The explosion lifted him off the ground and into his lieutenant's arms. Joe looked into his lieutenant's eyes and spoke his final words. He said, "My back is gone." He then died without a cry or a whimper. The 6 men whose lives were saved said that Joe was the bravest man they had ever known. For his heroism over the 40 hours that he was in battle, he was awarded 5 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star, and the military's highest award, the Medal of Honor. His body was unceremoniously wrapped in a parachute, and he was buried on a Dutch farm where he stayed for 5 years. After 5 years, his body was returned to Spokane, Washington, where he is now buried. General S.L.A. Marshall said this: "It was always Joe Mann leading the fight. It was Mann who kept on getting hit because he took the worst chances. He did not know how to quit." Such valor is not born by accident, Marshall said. It comes from a tremendous caring for others and is the result of the land and the love which made him possible. I've been to Holland 6 times and have walked in my uncle's footsteps from where he landed in his parachute to the trench where he died. Each September, on the date of his death, the Dutch gather at this monument to hear the reading of his Medal of Honor citation. I wrote A Greater Destiny because I want people to know how Joe lived, not how he died, how he was raised, and what character traits may have led him to sacrifice his life so that others might live. Of course, Joe's story has a sad ending because death is always sad. But it is far from a sad story. In the Bible, John 15:13 says, "Greater love has no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends." So besides being a story of adventure and heroism, it really is a love story. Not only to his friends in battle, but for his family, town, classmates, and the girl he left behind. My uncle and his friends, not much older than some of you, continued to fight even though they were outnumbered, underarmed, and had no medical supplies, food, or water. They were typical of the countless service members who have fought for our freedom. As proud as I am of my uncle, I am also proud of my father and 9 other uncles who all fought in World War II. I'm also proud of your family members who have served our country in the armed forces. Thank you for this opportunity to share my uncle's story. I appreciate Salem Academy for honoring the veterans who are here today. On Memorial Day, we remember the heroes who are no longer with us. On Veterans Day, we remember those who are. May we never forget that freedom isn't free and that you, our veterans, are the ones who help ensure that we never lose it. Thank you for your service.